What's good? Satoshi's mom here. I am here with Steven from Vertu Fine Art Gallery. And honestly, this guy's got an amazing take on the current market. He's been a part of this space for quite a while. And you've been also a part of the physical, like IRL space for, you said 20 years, right? It's been a while that you've been in the space, like working and learning and meeting artists. And you even also helped with Tyler Hobbs in the MoMA. So that's fucking amazing. I want to hear all about like kind of like where you started. I know you're based now in New York with the gallery. And so just like, I guess diving straight in, like what has it been like building up a gallery? You've been doing this for a while. And like, how did it all start, man? Again, thanks for coming on, by the way. Appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, Vertu's been around since 2004. I joined the gallery about 3 years ago, but I've been interested in art for about 8 to 9 years now. Was always surrounded by it growing up. Had a very keen interest on helping artists, on like discovering and figuring out how to sustain a career in the art world. 98% of artists, 99% of artists go on to fail or can't figure it out, work other jobs to supplement it. And I've always been in love with this idea of like, how can I help them? How can I guide them? How can I increase those odds? The gallery primarily deals with secondary markets, which is an interesting thing we can dive into because this space is always thinking about the difference between primary and secondary. But mostly secondary works, a lot by dead artists like Warhol, Basquiat, but also some living artists who are very old now, like Katz. We deal with primary, so we release some things. But yeah, the business model is adapted quite a few times now. And I just fell in love with NFTs and Web3 in around 2020, even though I've been in crypto since 2017. Told myself I would never leave the space again. I got bounced out by the ICOs, lost it all, was in love with the tech. I think it's a beautiful thing. It can change a lot of how we view the world. But once I discovered essentially art blocks, Tyler, his literature, the Chromie Squiggle, I just became in love with this idea of like minting in the moment, experimental stuff, on-chain work, basically just deciphered all of what it means, not necessarily how much it's worth, more of like how did I connect with it? How did I discover it? And what goes into like all of that? So there's a lot, we can go down the rabbit hole of, but yeah, it's just a little intro.
I love that. So like, being in the space, obviously the tech is incredibly intriguing, especially when ICOs were popping off and people are 10,000xing, like kind of like similar to how the meme coin space is now with Pump Fun. They're really like, in that same swing of things. And I'm curious, like, what is your take on meme coins and artists? Do you feel like there's been, like the gambling side of art has just been removed out of the game? And like this leaves collectors who are truly here for the art? Or like, what do you think about the current space and the ecosystem?
It's obviously, I think in this downturn, it's more because it's like a maturation kind of thing where the only people really left are the ones who like truly believe in it. I mean, art has always been a leap of faith. I don't think that's changed because of the technology. Like when you go and you buy a painting, that painting is not going to 10x or 5x or 2x or 4x like instantly. There's not just liquidity there for it. And I think that's a good thing. It allows someone to drive decision making on other things, not necessarily pure speculation or investment. And I think that's kind of where we're at now, where a lot of art that's being released, a lot of people that are here for, I tend to hope, the right reasons, not necessarily just to make a quick buck. On the meme coins topic, obviously people are here for a variety of reasons. No one's, I don't think anyone can say they're here for one exact thing. Of course, I participate in art. That's my go-to. But to say I'm not consuming noise and distractions from the, overall crypto ecosystem would just be a plain lie. Yeah, I think it's interesting, but I've always taken a turtle approach to art where it's like, I don't like the fast moving of crypto, even though I participate in it and every day and I understand it. And I think the more people we can get to like slow down, take a more thoughtful approach, decide whether or not they like this or not, and be able to come out and say it without getting, attacked by bag holders would be a good thing.
Right. What do you think about the pitchforks that come out when artists try stuff and people lose money?
It's their own faults. No one's forcing anyone to buy anything. It's solely like to put it on. I like to say sometimes like I'm like an artist protector. Like someone else has got to come out and, shout at people and say like, this is the right or wrong way to do things. Like if we want to move this space forward, it's got to be encouraging them that failure is okay. That's part of art, right? Is creating a practice, creating processes, using the tools that are available, figuring out like, wow, I'm onto something. I failed. This didn't work. Going back and forth that mental process and bringing it to the public, having the courage and bravery to say, I created this thing, should be beneficial to this ecosystem and not more so like, oh, don't do that, or oh, this is bad for the price of my collections, or there's too much supply. Like there's too much focus on the market, which I understand, but I think there should be more encouragement to push out the creativity.
I think that last bit there especially is so important. There's so much focus on the market that collectors, people who have spent some money buying stuff, now feel they have this energy and like this stature to be like, okay, artists, don't do this. Don't mint too much. Don't do anything besides just share a ton of work on your timeline and then mint like one thing. Keep your prices high, control your supply. What is your take towards people with the attitude of, one, telling artists what to do? Do you think that it's appropriate? And are there like some lines to it? And two, to controlling supply, do you feel that that is a big problem for artists right now? Or what is your take on all that kind of?
For sure. So I do think people should have an opinion. They should have a taste. They should be able to say what they like and what they don't like. Like that is the beautiful thing about art, is that it's subjective. And that's what I think will make it scale, make it grow, is that we just start to define these tastemakers, not necessarily on like money, just on like discovery, just on like, wow, this thing is interesting because of X, Y, and Z reasons. In terms of appropriate responses to how to approach that, as long as it's genuine, and not necessarily like telling them what to do, more so like, at least this is how I approach it, is like offering them a perspective, or offering them an idea, or brainstorming and saying, hey, have you thought about this, and this? And then also flat out telling them, hey, I'm so sorry, I don't like this piece. Like there's nothing against you. It's nothing against your overall bodies of work or your collections. It's like, this piece just isn't for me, and there's a example that goes way back that I always refer to. I won't mention the artist, but his artwork at the time was flipping for like 10x right when you bought it. Like it was the easiest flip of all time because the artist was hot. People wanted the work. NFTs were in a better state in terms of market. And he offered me a piece. He said, hey, I love what you do. Thanks for advising me on a few things. I want to offer you this piece at this price. It's yours. And I wrote back a very thoughtful thing, like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love all your work. That's why we're here talking. But I don't vibe with this work. Like it's not for me. And ever since that day, I gained his respect. I don't think someone ever told him no. He was so used to like people want it because they can make an easy 5x and 10x, but that's not what this is all about to me. I care about the greater ecosystem. I care about advancing it. I care about spreading this art out to the world. There's so many people out there who they don't know that this stuff even exists. We're still so small, and like, how can we advance that? I think one, by starting with the artists and preparing them and advancing them and curating their thoughts around how to make this sustainable, I think is very important. I don't know if I went into your second question, but
No, okay, so yeah, that's amazing. I love that response. I love that take. I think personally that right now we're seeing an opportunity in the art space again, where first we went through this crazy mania where NFTs were so speculative. People were like, "Holy shit! Like this could be the way that I retire my family by buying 1,000 of these, like crypto Inu Shiba dick butts, and like hopefully I'll be rich off this." And then like it led to a lot of people getting wrecked, of course, and that's part of it. I think in like people are kind of jaded from that, but then also a lot of that part of the space has now moved on, and whether they left because they just don't like it, or maybe they weren't here really for the right reason anyway, they were more so looking for that next gamble. Now the opportunity for gambling has been basically completely rooted out of art, because even artists like massive artists now that are doing drops, you're not getting those big flips from just being a part of it anymore. You're more so attracting art appreciators. And I think that that's really healthy and amazing, because now most people, they can go to their gambling arena with Pumped Up Fun, with Solana, and really like the art appreciators are here left on Ethereum and Bitcoin and other places where people are purchasing art. The on-chain art movement is continuously moving forward. I can't wait to talk more about that as well with you. But I think that, I'm curious your take on like, do you believe that who's left now is kind of like the people who are going to be pushing this forward? And that like, do you think that it's healthy that the market has kind of moved in the way it has, even though sales are lower? What's your take on all that?
100%. This was needed. The way things were going, it was crazy. I mean, you had to be there to see it, and like it's really, I mean, it's also interesting though, is like what you referred to is like the people leaving, or were they have some kind of pre-bias towards that period, towards that moment, but there's nowhere to really like understand, other than just talk to the people that lived through it, of like what that was all about. And that's another like major key like component to all of this, is like, where do we go to like learn about these things? Where do we go to discover what happened and what came before us, rather than just being like in this chamber of like people who are like super passionate about it. I mean, that's my favorite part. It's like the people that are here, they all really believe in this vision. They believe in this like end goal, that like this will be the primary form of ownership, distribution, preservation of the arts. Like there's so many things that blockchain just like completely redefines, that is completely, it gets me excited every morning to wake up and say, wow, we're here, we're doing this. And it's still not a very popular thing amongst the wider art community. And that just, to me, gives us time, like time is, it's good. It's a good thing. I think it's not, I'm in no rush to say, other than all the noise and things that distract me within the space. If it takes, which I think it will, another decade, another 2 decades to get to where we think it's going to get, we're pioneering it right now. Like we're having these conversations, we're talking to the people, we're talking to the artists, we're talking to the curators, we're building it brick by brick. And that's an exciting thing to be a part of. That's motivating. We're writing the history books right now. Like we're watching them unveil. And yeah, the market's in a good place, like we were taking careers, like 90-year careers, and packaging them into like 3-month moments, and trying to predict value and protect floor prices, and like all these things that like, what's going on here? Like this is not a video game. This isn't like a simulate. Like these are real people's lives that we're playing with. So I don't know. I think it's healthy for sure.
Yeah, like I think you have an incredibly sound voice for really what has happened, because it's happened so fast. it's almost like there was like a whiplash of, wait a second, why isn't my art instantly selling 1,000 pieces on a reverse Dutch auction of like 10 ETH? And then all of a sudden, like, I didn't just make 30,000 ETH from my generative art drop that's a cartoon, which is sick, but still, like, you know, it's kind of wild. It really showed how the market was so speculative that, because of course, like, if you tell someone, hey, I'm reliably going to give you, like, if you give me $100, I'll give you 1,000. You'd have people, if it was totally legit, lined up around the block times 1,000. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what NFTs was. Now, with all of that kind of bled out of the market, and I believe every day we're continuously progressing to bleed more of that out of the market and find a healthy balance of that. I think that we're in a really good place, and I think it is an amazing way to look at it, to say the market is healthy now. Because I think a lot of people are saying, oh, my work's not selling, we're in a bear market, this is tough for artists. But in reality, in the physical world of artists, I mean, fuck, I think we're so privileged to be able to do what we're doing in a digital realm, where physical and traditional art, like, has absolutely, it's been completely 180-degree difference versus like what an artist in the Web3 game has been able to do. And in that time frame, like you said, the 3 months shortened. So, like, touching back again on like the health of the market, what do you think about like supply for artists, and like kind of trying to restrict supply or manipulate price based off of having lower supply and only releasing X, Y, and Z on certain times? What is your take with that?
I don't think it's going to be a popular one. This will probably be a hot take, but I'm very strong, confident about it.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows anything. Like, even the experts who are talking to the biggest artists, the most successful, like, we all have a strategy, we all have a way of thinking, we all have a perspective, we all have our own personal experiences that form these methods of thinking, and they're all amazing to consider, right? They're all amazing to strategize around, ideate, and brainstorm. But every artist that exists, whether physical, Web3, traditional, any which way, they have their own path. They have their own ways of doing things. They have their own messages that they're trying to bring out to the world. Their own meaning, their own interpretations. Like, it is completely unique to who that individual is. And so as far as supply goes, it's like, if you're, depending on where you are in your career, which most artists here are young and emerging, even the artists that are quote unquote blue chip, they're still 35 years old. They're having their first kid. They're 33 years old. Like, they're 25 years old. Like, these are young, emerging artists. Like, yes, they've made a ton of money. They're very established in this world. They're in a very confident, strong, like, when it quote unquote blue chip in that respect, I understand it, but they're still learning. They're still trying new things. They're still experimenting. When it comes to supply, it's like, push out the work. There's never going to be a perfect opportunity to release in any market. People said, a year ago, 2 years ago, and this is crediting back to, like, we need to understand these moments better. It's like, oh, when crypto goes up, everyone's going to start buying my art. Crypto is close to all-time highs, and people are calling the art market a bear. They're saying, oh, no one's buying my art. Back when Bitcoin was at 15,000 or 12,000, people were saying, oh, crypto's dead, no one's buying my art. Like, we got to think about this more so in, like, art for art's sake. Like, we got to make the best art we can make. We got to practice. We got to, figure out new ways of doing things, and then push that out, as, in my opinion, push it out in a genuine intention, in a very intentional way, as much as possible. Get it out to collectors' hands, build those relationships, find the curators, find the galleries, talk to them. That's if you really want to do this full time, if you really want to build a career out of this. Of course, if you're just trying to sell a work here and there, and you view this as a part-time gig, then it's a very different equation, that goes into this. But speaking for the people who want to sell art and make art full time, it's got to be your life. You got to wake up, live, breathe it, advance it, curate it, collaborate like that. That's a very underutilized thing, is collaboration within the space. So my viewpoint is like, how will you grow? How will you reach as many people as possible if you're holding back supply because of value or because of price? Like, obviously it's something to consider. It's a variable. But there's so much, more to the picture. And I will stop, or I can go into an example like Warhol. He is, the most obvious thing to look back on and say, new technology came along, new way of distribution with printmaking came along, and he leaned into that and he distributed as much artwork as possible. People are saying, what are you doing? Why are you releasing editions of 250? Why are you doing all these different series? Why are you building this factory to literally pump out art and get it out to the world when no one's buying it, no one cares about it? It was looked at as crazy. It was looked at as, this isn't right, this isn't smart, this isn't art, all the things we're hearing and, understanding today. Is like, I think it's a very comparable moment of like, he got so big and so popular because there's so much out there. He became an icon. Like, everyone wanted to do work with him. Everyone wanted to collect it. And this took a long time. It didn't happen over a 3-month span, let alone a 3-year span. So that's my take on supply, but I don't know how popular it is.
Fire. Absolutely fire take. That's like, what you're doing is you're voicing what the space needs to actually hear. That's my take on what your take. Like, seriously, like when you say too, like, we're waking up, we're advancing this, we need to practice, we need to put our heart and soul into this. And it's not about as much of the market. The dynamics of the market has dominated the digital art space for years. And I think we're finally seeing that tide shift. And it's voices like yours that are on the leading edge of that shift. And I also am very passionate about being on the leading edge of that shift. I'm passionate about blurring the lines between traditional and digital art and making it just art. Like, as we move forward, it's art, because the next generation is natively digital. Like, I go to the Dolly Museum, which is in my community, and they had an exhibit of a middle school that they hosted like 1,000 artworks from this middle school as a contest. Like, people submitted from the school, and literally about half, if not a little more than half, the medium listed was digital. So these people, kids of the next generation, they are natively making digital art. Do you think that they're going to call it art, or are they going to be like, oh, this is digital art? Like, to them, everything's digital. The entire world that they live in is digital. So right now, it's like we're seeing that tide shift where people are now starting to realize, like, this is all art and we need to treat it as such. I mean, there's a lot that the digital art space can learn from the trad art space. So I want to ask you about that, because you have a lot of experience in both. What parallels do you see, and how do you think we can get to that point where we do blur those lines between traditional and digital art, where the traditional art world does respect and understand digital art more? How can we get there, and what are we doing today to push forward in that vision?
For sure. I think it starts with showing them, like, if, there's so many countering points that, like, trad art doesn't understand this ecosystem doesn't understand trad art. And it's largely because, one, like, time, investment, resources from both sides, they come with completely different approaches. Like, the 50-50 model works as so because the gallery puts in so much time, investment, resources to get the work shown, introduce it to new people, get it framed. Like, there's a lot of friction that comes in, physical media. And all of that is completely, gone in Web3, like, right? Like it's ownership is redefined. You don't need any way to view this thing. Anyone can view it, whether you own it or not. Everyone can enjoy it. Everyone can experience it. And with that becomes this idea that like galleries are bad, or gallery or middlemen are extractive. And I think that's a very, Web3 takes that approach and that thought, because within Web3, it's possible, right? Like you can own the entirety of the marketing, advertising, creation, tech work, like that whole stack is possible to do by yourself. Is it easy? By no means. That is what goes for both spaces. Art is not easy. To make a living off art will never be easy. Blockchain enables that, but I still think that gatekeeper, those middlemen, they're very important people. And why I say that is because they're the ones who employ people in the arts. They're the ones who educate people on the arts. They're the one who brings the art out to the world. They're the one who, puts a lot of time and investment into the educational resources, the curatorial aspects, the text, contextualizing the work. If that all goes away because Web3 comes and eats its lunch, what does that mean for the greater art world? And that's like such an interesting kind of thing. I don't think will play out for a long time, but it kind of scares me, right? Like we'll see less art. We won't have people helping push this art out to the world. Maybe we won't scale. We won't grow because there's such a divide between those two ways of thinking. I've, slithered through in both kind of realms because I've made it my life's point to understand the tech, understand the psychology behind these artists, which are completely different from the traditional side of things. And there's a level of trust there. There's a level of like, okay, he knows what he's talking about. He's here, he's participating. And with that, I use those, artist relationships and ideas and perspectives and bring it out into that world and just show it as art. Like you said, digital, physical, it doesn't matter. It's just at the end of the day, I can represent it as just another piece of art. And the beautiful thing about that is when people come and look at it, they make their own interpretations, they make their own emotional responses, they have their own ideas behind it, they ask questions. They're not afraid to say, hey, I've never heard of this artist before. Can you tell me a little bit about it? And it's not until sometimes 3, 5, 10 years that people come back and buy that thing. It takes a long time for the brain and the mind to be like, okay, I'll spend $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, $100,000 on this. It takes a lot of work to get to that point to feel comfortable, but I think we will scale, we will advance, we will grow this small sector of the art internet world by bringing it to new audiences, by educating them, by curating interesting things. That's my
Wow.
two.
Dude, holy shit. I can't wait to like re-listen to this to fully even absorb this even further. This is incredible. Like this is what needs to be said. Like this is the energy that needs to be brought to the table. And because the most bullish thing has always been how much money you can make from the art up until now, when now people realize they're not making the money that they were making. So it's changed the game. And having, like we spoke about, the people being kind of forced out of the market because the opportunities aren't there. All of the traders are gone. Therefore, 90% plus of the liquidity is gone. Therefore, it does lead to people being like, why am I not selling for thousands of dollars instantly? And they were kind of spoiled with that initially. And now it's kind of become a little more tougher. And I've discussed that and, made various tweets about how like it's gotten tougher for artists simply because the liquidity has gone on to other things. And that's a good thing though, because people who are here are in it five the art, like that's what this is all about, is talking about who's in it five the art. And you're definitely in it five the art, in it 420 the art, in it 69 million the art. Like, so I'm really appreciate that you're here today. I have some other things I want to talk about, like tweets that you made recently. So one of these I want to just read out. I think this is really powerful, and I'd love for you to expand on this a little bit if possible. You said, if you're not documenting your process and progress, then what are you trying to achieve? This speaks many multiples on why anyone should care about what you're doing. If you cannot speak on this for days, if not weeks, then maybe your process is part of the problem. Start over, scrap it, and move on to a new idea. The space moves quick. We should encourage artists to move in and out of concepts without transactional pressure. The blockchain enables this, yet no one uses it. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Like the process for artists, if they're not incredibly passionate about it and they can't speak about it for days, you're encouraging them to move on and try something new because the space moves so quick. We shouldn't make people feel like they can't try stuff, that they can't do stuff because of this market pressure. So like, I'd love to hear more of your take on that. Like, what does that mean? And what can artists do to have more success in a market that's truly been denominated by dollars and not by the lore and the actual energy behind the work as much?
For sure. I think a lot of this stems from my like traditional experience, like going to a studio visit and understanding why this artist is doing this thing in this moment was always a very powerful moment for me. It was always, when it comes to the technicalities of like why someone's doing something, and when I before I start actually curating work, it's like I want to fully grasp like why are you doing these things, and like what does it take, what got you to this point, and then how does value accrue to those X, Y, and Z things. And then, when I discovered all of that through like a studio visit, and you get to see the sketches, you get to see the failures, you get to see all of these things through the process that you eventually get to that final end result. That's what makes it worth something. That's the context that I'm mind blown by. I love, like, I'm so intrigued by. On the blockchain in digital art as it currently, exists, all we see is the end result, or we see maybe what the artist goes through, what they decide to post, but like we don't see all the struggles in the back end. We don't see all the failures. We don't see all these moments, leading up to that sale. And that's what provides, opinions. It contextualizes the work. Something is so much cooler if you see what it's came from. You see all these like different little tweaks on subject matter or concepts or ideas or compositions, and then you see that final result and you're like, wow, you're informed. You're seeing it in real time. The blockchain exists to archive these moments, to preserve these moments, yet we only use it as a transactional interface. Like, why are we not seeing these sketches? Why are we not like leaning into why we dislike or like this sketch? That can further inform the final existence of the work. Does that pay the bills? Does that get platforms paid? No, and that's probably why we don't see it. But that's part of my curatorial vision. My thesis is like, I really want to make it worth it for them. I want them to understand like why I value certain things, where I derive value from. And this is my own personal, like, I think this is where the digital art market will head. Like, maybe again, it might take a decade. It might take tastemakers to come out of the, grassroots communities. But it's not solely like I spent 10 ETH on this thing and now it's worth that. That is such a, I think, elementary viewpoint into the market. I'm trying to build like foundational thinking around like, if an artist can't understand, can't present, can't describe those messages of their process, of their story, then why is anyone else going to care about these works or their value or their market or their floor price or all these things that are just surface level, in my opinion? Again, this might be a hot take. Maybe I'm one of few who think that any of this matters, right? Some people might just like something, buy it, and that's fine. That's totally cool too. But I think to really scale, advance, and push it in the direction that I see that it can get to, I think these kinds of conversations matter, but only time will tell.
Yes. They do matter so much. And like, I think like these hot takes are what the space needs. I wouldn't even consider them hot takes because I just think that they're incredibly sound. Like they are the truth. I think a hot take is like really when someone is just saying some shit that like nobody wants to hear. And in reality, if nobody wants to hear the truth, then it's because they're trying to cling to this old paradigm that we had in 2021 where yes, like everything was going, parabolic, like, but now is a new opportunity and it's just as beautiful in a different way, if not more beautiful, because now we're offering the opportunity for artists to cement themselves and leverage the blockchain with respect, like to respect the chain. And that leads me to also want to talk to you more about too, like the importance of on-chain art, of permanence. Like, what do you think about on-chain art and like the future that it has, and that versus non-on-chain art like Arweave and IPFS, and even leading all the way to base? What are your takes on all of that?
I think it all has its place within the blockchain. Like it all informs different mediums of art, of different kinds of artists, direction, and what they're trying to achieve. There's a place for all of it. The beautiful thing about on-chain is like okay, so the blockchain provides constraints, and these constraints largely, which is money, you have to write this data to the chain, and that can be very costly in the kind of approach you have to take. But constraints are like a creative kind of volcano, is how I look at it. Is like it makes these artists squeeze and fold and bend in different directions and take these very refined approaches that are very well thought out. They're very process driven. You have to get into the weeds of like, well, what does this really mean? And this, by the way, this is speaking like for, did, for example, in this whole machine and the ghost thing that he built, I find it absolutely beautiful that he took the process of building this whole thing. And this was after a few years of like open sourcing these things, allowing anyone to use it, allowing artists to experiment on chain without the need to be too technical. That's a amazing thing. Like that's just going to unleash this, like, which is a very small community now. But once people fully realize of like, okay, this thing went offline and now what do I do? And they find these tools and they're more available. I mean, they're available now, but more like understood. It's going to unlock this like whole realm of kind of on-chain art in a way that like doesn't really currently exist. Right now, it's a very niche category of the digital art world. But what I was able to see with the imagery and the thought process and, stealing like long form, but repackaging it in a way that made sense for what Did was trying to do with Machine and the Ghost. That's only unlocked and only like possible because of what the blockchain is initially built for. It's I compare it to like canvas all the time, or like paper or printmaking. Like they all have their own ways that make them special because of the mark making, because of the paints, because of how it's applied to the canvas, because of how the canvas is stretched. If you want to get more art out to the world, then maybe you take the printmaking approach and you produce editions of 200 that are more widely accessible. Like all of these different models in traditional media are now kind of being applied within the blockchain world, whether you see base or IPFS or on-chain. I think they're working hand in hand. And the fascinating part of all of this, I think, is like art in traditional media is not necessarily meant to last forever. We have archival inks, we have things to preserve it, but oftentimes we see damages in the framing, we see corners being bent, we see ink starting to bleed, we see ink starting to fade, and these things matter within the provenance. Like they matter because if you want to tell us something is real or fake, you know that the ink will fade over 55 years, that this print should not be as red as it initially was back 50 years ago. And I think that's a beautiful thing of like tangible assets. That will also be the case for these digital assets. Not all of them will survive. Some of them will survive as long as Ethereum survives, as long as Solana survives. Some of them will be more affordable, more accessible, like on Base. Like there's all these different ways of thinking around approaches within the digital landscape, but I think you can understand them in a different context within traditional media. Like it's kind of side by side. Like we're rebuilding this thing. We're building it from the ground up, this whole digital art landscape, but we should build it the way we want to build it, not just like how the market perceives us or, whoever has the most money. Like we should voice our opinions and build it the way that will be beneficial for the most amount of people. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Epic. I want to just lead right off that to ask you a question. Two different scenarios. One is in the next 10 years, things in your mind go incredibly well for this space and over a 10-year time span. And then the other is things kind of go an incredibly shitty way for the space over the next 10 years and they don't progress, but they instead potentially head down a different path. Where do you think that we will head in a positive way of doing these things where the vision is strong, the vision that you're discussing here, for example, like we start focusing on how artists can have actual sustainable growth and actually contribute to this with respect to the blockchain and create iconic works, and they practice and they pour in the energy, and 10 years down the line of that versus like, focusing on the art as specifically a medium for exchange and capitalization over the next 10 years. What are those two different paths like in your mind? Starting with the positive side, where do you think we'll be in 10 years?
I think it's extremely hard to tell. As you know, like 10 years is like, I don't even know, what is that? Like 1,000 years in real time or in
crypto time? Yeah.
But I think in a positive lens, like again, 10 years might be too short of a time frame, but like everything we're talking about right now will just be like the norm. Like the UI, the UX, the whole Web3 crypto, like how it's understood, how it's perceived, it'll all just be like, oh yeah, like you own this thing on the blockchain, like we don't call it NFTs. We don't like, oh, I buy this print. Like, oh, it also is documented. It has provenance, and this all exists on the blockchain. Like that's just taken for granted. And we also start to see artists here exist more within traditional realm. Like they're just considered artists. Like it won't matter if they use AI or generative or code their art, or they'll just be visual artists. They'll just be, oh, there's a Tyler Hobbs next to a Warhol. Like it'll just be normal. People that come out to these shows, the galleries, the hotbeds of the art market, like these artists will just exist within it's just going to become, simultaneous. Like we won't think twice about it. And yeah, I mean, once we get away of like, it's still so new. That's why everyone wants to grab onto that newness, on that being first, on historical, when like, who are we to say, like, we're building it or living in it in real time. Like, that's the exciting part. Like, I don't want to like, just, I think, heading more down the negative side is like, if we don't see any progress, if we just, let people get scammed, we mislead them, they lose all their money, they don't collect things that they love, they don't collect things that they want to display on their TVs or display in physical format, we just continue to lose art patrons. Like, like people come for art and then they stay for DeFi and they never look at art again. Like, I want it to be like a welcoming ecosystem. They should be so excited about what's going on here. I don't think that'll be the case because I just think it's what's bubbling here is too powerful. Like there's just so much, so many moving parts, and that's probably part of the problem, part of why we've not like fully scaled to where I mean we've made a lot of progress in 3 years. Don't get me wrong. We've seen it with museums, with galleries, with different artists entering the space, but if it's just attracting, you know, quote unquote investors, they're just here because they want to make money, and we don't see any real progression in the ideas, the concepts. We're not attracting like new talent. We're not accessible. Like that would suck, you know, if people hold back their supply. That's another thing. Like if we don't see art, like these artists are so young, they're already very wealthy, like even the best, like, and some of them don't have websites, some of them aren't discoverable, some of them are praised like they are Picasso in our space, and I understand, and then nobody knows them outside of this world. Like why? You know, like you have a chance to like redefine, be known as like a visionary, be literally like make an impact on like so many people. I mean, look how many people like Keith Haring impacted. Like that opportunity is for the taking for a handful of artists here. And it's about like, do they want to do that? You know, like, do they have that idea in mind? Do they really want to go for it? I hope so. I would hate, and I think this is part of that negative side in 10 years, if like we just conserve all of that like immense talent, like the unbelievable artists here, if that's just held into like our ecosystem and not spread out to like even people who don't give a shit about art, you know, who are just like they stumble upon a mural on a street. Like that's what I want to see for this art world. That's where I hope we can get to. So
Yeah, I completely like I agree with you. I think that that's going to be so beautiful to watch unfold, and we are building it every day. That's the thing that people also must remember is we're building it, we're doing it now. And each of us has that responsibility to be able to, and the privilege as well to be able to right now push forward this message, push forward this vision. We're doing it brick by brick. When artists are holding back all their supply because they fear that the big collectors are not going to be favoring them and they won't make the money that they need to in order to survive, it's not encouraging the growth of our space. Instead, we should encourage artists, mint what feels good to you, mint like with provenance and intention and respect to the blockchain. Like I was just talking with Color, and he was saying how his philosophy is like he doesn't ever want to share an artwork on his timeline that hasn't been minted first. He wants the first time that it shows to the world the provenance to be that was the first time that it was imprinted outside of his own eyes. I love that take because
that's fascinating. I love that too.
yeah,
That's
right?
amazing.
Isn't that so good? Like, 'cause
Yeah.
it encourages everything that we're discussing here. It encourages to have respect for the chain. And like, you know, for example, like what DID has built, I think, is first of all with Efficax, it has not been fully like I guess it hasn't been fully adopted by the space in the sense that this small, little tiny spot of on-chain creators and enjoyers, of course, understands what that is. But I think the full impact of that, making the UI, the UX, the easy way to get on chain for somebody, despite the cost, obviously, it's going to be a little costly. That's so powerful. So we haven't even yet seen the impacts of a tool like that. And Machine in the Ghost is an example of something like fully on-chain collection, contract is owned by DID. You're, proliferating that. That's so fucking cool. I absolutely love that. But I want to ask also as well to backtrack slightly, what do you think is, like, I guess this is kind of going to vary in a lot of different ways for people. And potentially for yourself, it might not be really easy to answer. But you know, giving it the best shot. What do you think is the best playbook in a sense for artists who are coming into the space, who are serious about appreciating it and appreciating the chain, and, you know, pouring their hearts in and practicing and becoming their best version and dropping showstoppers of work that is their best work? Like, what is the best playbook for these people? Like, I've seen you post recently about Linktree is just bullshit. You know, everyone uses Linktree, including myself. That is definitely giving me a different perspective on it. Like, from things to Linktree to also like how they share their work and their philosophy. Like, what is the best way for an artist to approach this market and to have the best chance of crushing it and getting their work shared widely and having the most success?
For sure. I wish I had, you know, like you said, I mean, if I had the answer, I would be worth a ton of money. But I think the beautiful thing is that, like, one, the people here are more accessible than anyone in the world. Like, we're still so small. Like, it's so easy to reach out and like get a response, or at least reach out and maybe hit a few responses, right? Like, get some kind of feedback. But you have to be willing, right? You have to have the courage to like really want to go after it. But also, like, don't lie to yourself, you know? Like, how many artists set up a link tree? They go through the process and they're like, okay, it's set up nice. But don't look at it from like a collector's perspective. Like, the amount of times that I go to a link tree, I see a bunch of like, I don't see art, right? Like, I came for the art. Now I click the link. Okay, you've got me in. Now I need to click another link, which is just frustrating. And the link that I click, it's I don't even know what I'm clicking. I'm clicking a link to a marketplace. I don't know where that's going to take me. So the funniest part of all of it is like, the marketplaces are so like, they're kind of like everything. They dictate how we view the art. They dictate how we discover the art. They dictate what the art is next to. That's one of the biggest problems, right? Like, that is by far. So I would say, for an artist entering the space, like, how you present your work, how you want it to be understood, interpreted, the message you're trying to send across. Who are you? You know, who are you as a person? The marketplace doesn't tell me anything about that. Your process, like, that's another thing. Like, literature, do you want to describe the work, right? Do you want other people to describe the work? Where's the work shown? Is it shown anywhere, right? Do you have a CV? Like, all these things. Do you have a artist statement? Like, what are you going after, right? Like, all these things that are taken for granted within like traditional art, which is just like educational things, right? They don't have a place in like Web 2 or Web 3. They're just like, if you're an artist, like, maybe you should tell the world like what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, how you want people to see it, how you want people to discover it. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is like, present it the way that you want people to see it. You want people to collect it. You want people to nurture it. You want people to learn about it. If you have a like, and I think the Linktree example is just, it's so funny to me because it's so kind of like, that's what everyone does. It's kind of like the norm, but it's like, you're linking someone to links, and the links are bringing them to marketplaces that have like 1,000,000,000 other things that are going to distract me and never get me back to your profile, never get back. It's like, you have one small chance and you're making me go through a series of steps to just like randomly, like, I don't even know if I'm going to click the link of the thing that intrigued me initially. And what if I don't like that art? And that's probably it. You know, I'm probably going to go browsing through Foundation now. So that's one thing
Wow.
that's been on my mind. But yeah, I think that's like a good start to, like, if you're an artist in the space and you want to like figure out how to approach it, well, start with a different lens. Start with like, what does a collector want to see? You know?
Yes, that's super good advice in my opinion. Like, I love that. I had to jot down some notes while you were talking there on that. Like, because ideally, instead of a link tree, imagine people then went to a site where it's easily scrollable of all of your best work. Like, not just like, hey, here's my work chronologically. And like, it's not about links. It's literally about like displaying your art in a way that shows who you are, that easily shares who you are and your process essentially, and everything you've done, but all of your best stuff, like your statement potentially, like you said, about like beliefs, dreams of yours, and like letting the world know what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do, and presenting it in a way that like you want people to see who you are and understand who you are. Like it reminds me of a quote that I remember from Hafka, who he says like, look, like if you have 1,000 pieces of art, pick your best ones, pick your best 10, 5 to 10 or 20, I guess at most, and share those, because when someone's going to see you in, especially in like a physical perspective, they can't look at 1,000 pieces of art. Even digitally, they can't look at 100 pieces of art at once. So like show them your best work, show them who you are, get your name in front of them in a way that they can remember. Like if they clicked you for example, for me, like I've had a big trend with nostalgia, people really loving my work for its nostalgia and what it can bring them in that way. And if I then bring them to a link tree and it shows them a bunch of glitch art and a bunch of generative art and a bunch of other random shit, it doesn't tell them anything about me, I'm doing them a disservice. I'm doing me a disservice. I'm doing the art game a disservice. The art world, what it could be, I'm doing it a disservice. And I really believe in that. I think that that's a big message for artists to, leverage that, leverage your feed, leverage the place where you're getting the attention. So I love that, man. I think that you've given such amazing takes on the space, and I will continue to support you in any way that I can as far as sharing and as far as like proliferating. And I'm really glad that I could have you on here today to talk about this stuff. And I'd love to have you back on here as well. Anytime that you want to talk more, maybe do like a round 2 of this, maybe in a little while, in like a month or something, and like talk about what's changed, because I think we do have the opportunity to really be the cheerleaders in a sense of this vision of what can be. And don't stress so much about minting supply and all that stuff. Instead, I think what I've taken from this is, as an artist, make your absolute best work that you possibly can. Don't worry about supply. Keep practicing every day. Hone your craft, get better, talk to people, be vocal, and just understand that it's all a process. It's not going to happen in a few months like it did in 2021. But I mean, maybe it can. We won't limit it and say that it won't, but let's just instead assume like every day is an opportunity to work. Every day is an opportunity to get better. Every day is an opportunity to learn and connect. And I'm just really passionate about the future of this space and what can be and what I believe will be. And it's people like you, Stephen, that are pushing this forward. So huge, huge, huge respect to you. Like, I can't say enough how much I respect the fuck out of you for the vision that you have, the words that you're spreading, and the energy as well. So seriously, like, huge props to you. And I can't wait to see what more of an impact you make, because you've just gotten on my radar. I don't know how that it's taken that long, but like, I love to see you pushing forward with Did. I look forward to seeing what other artists you end up highlighting and what else you end up doing. So I guess as a way to wrap this up, because we are getting close to time, unfortunately, I'd love to speak with you for literally hours and hours more, honestly. But I want to say ask you, what is the future for Vertu Fine Art? Like, what's the next step for you in the immediate future, I suppose, and the long-term future as well, and like what's next for Steven Santoro?
For sure. Thank you for all the kind words. Really, it means a lot.
Of course.
Because my voice is, I'm limited to the 1,700 follow. I say it all the time. Like, I have a great, if you go in and look, great people, quality people who follow me, and that's what I care about most. But it doesn't reach. I don't have the big reach, and that's okay. Like, I'm here for the long run. I'm building. The future of Vertu is to support, right? Like, I am this independent thinker, this curator for this traditional gallery that has a lot of experience, credibility, and a really good reputation within up and down the East Coast, and a great collector base. And it's, how do I show them what's going on here in a way that's easy to digest, right? Like there so often, so many times, like the art that goes on here is just like super complicated. Like the message speaks to a very small crowd, you know, to maybe the crowd that's just on Twitter, or maybe just the Solidity people, you know, a very developer kind of group, or that appreciate a certain style or a certain genre of art. Like I don't want to be looked at as a platform that just tries to make money, right? Like that's not my goal. Like Vertu is this vehicle that I want to use to elevate the voices that I think are doing interesting things in this space. And interesting can vary, right? Like Did, for example, he doesn't have a huge following, but I think he's doing fascinating things for the space. And then you can go up to someone like Tyler, who is, you know, huge in this space, who I have the utmost respect for, that also I think can really benefit from getting his work out to the world, to providing it, you know, presenting it to new audiences, getting his message across. So it doesn't matter about whether you are this style, it doesn't matter about if it's this supply or this amount of following, or like, I'm just following my vision, I'm following my voice, and I'm using the resources that we've built within, you know, traditional art to elevate these artists and these people within this space and support them, right, through thick and thin. Like when you work with me, it's not just we work on a project and like see you later. It's like I form real bonds and relationships with these people. Like I truly care about them as like friends, as family, and I want to support them into the future. Like I say all the time, like everything that I think and talk about is around the topic of, and this is kind of varying from Vertu, this is just my own personal, you know, ideas and visions that I want to pursue, is like, how can I make it more sustainable? How can you do this for the rest of your life? Because if you can, if you are in someone like Tyler's situation, you are going to do great things for the world. And that's how I view it. Like you're going to provide amazing experiences, amazing opportunities to collect things that will go up in your home, collect things that will sit in your wallet, display on your TV. You'll just provide these little mental exercises and moments that will inspire people to do, you know, unbelievable things. Like I say it all the time, Fidenza and art blocks kind of like changed my life's perspective to a varying degree. And I didn't own a Fidenza and I didn't own anything on art blocks for maybe, I don't know, months after. And learning about those things inspired me so much to get to the point where I am today, and can look back and say I executed on X, Y, and Z project. I've worked with the MoMA, for example. Like these are things that I never would have imagined. And if it weren't for that moment of discovering art blocks, Fidenza, Tyler, like without even owning it, without having any financial interest in it, maybe I'm not in this space. Maybe, you know, maybe I'm not even in the art world anymore. Like maybe I've gone taking the inspiration elsewhere. Like, so I'll leave you with this and we can move on. But every block that passes by is essentially like a time bomb. It's like these little transactions get thrown into this block, and over, I don't know how many, like 10 seconds or something, a new block is created and transactions enter. And every moment, every block that gets filled and you don't have a transaction in there is one less block that you can like cement your artwork, your provenance, whatever message you're trying to distribute. And once enough time goes by, right, like a year, let's say, that you don't cement anything into the chain, you're basically saying, I'm either too scared, I don't, you know, I'm not participating anymore, no matter what your socials tell me. Like, we need to encourage to get as many art transactions in there as possible, because DeFi is dominating us, gaming is dominating us. These are all people that are internally in this, you know, crypto ecosystem that will discover art one day. They will become inspired like I did. They might join. They might spend a ton of capital. These are great people to have. And we have yet to reach them. You know, we can grow internally. We can grow externally. We have the art world it's been a niche place to start, but I'm very excited by its potential. And I encourage every artist, just get those transactions and get those, be a part of those blocks, whether you're selling the art or you're keeping it for yourself or you're dedicating it to a sketch. We need more art art in each block that passes. So
Wow. I'm like mind blown, dude. This has been, I think, the best pod so far that I've done. And like, no, I swear, man, this is seriously power. Like, this is something for every artist to listen to. This is something for every person who gives a fuck about the space to listen to. And your voice is incredibly powerful and deserves to be heard far and wide. Like, the reach for now might be low, but I believe over time, as you continuously push forward with this message, that's massive. Like, it will be far and wide. So, man, thank you again so much for coming on, and thank you for your words. Thanks for pouring the energy, your heart into this, and for letting me get a peek into your mind on how you view this space. It's been insanely valuable for me, and I know that people listening are absolutely going to really take so much from this. So I think the ripple effect from today may be even more massive than we can imagine, just from whoever comes across this. And people need to get you on their pods to talk more. And I encourage you, man, to push that comfort zone of making more hot takes for the sake of this space. Like, people need to hear the way that you think, and anybody who's going to shit on it is not going to be here for the right reasons anyway, because whoever doesn't resonate with what you're saying. I mean, of course, everyone is deserving of their opinion, but I believe that you are an incredibly sound voice for this space. And the way you're thinking about this is the way that moving forward, that's what's going to push us forward, like, for real. So to say you're in it 5D art is an understatement, man. Thanks again so much for coming through, Stephen. And I look forward to hopefully having you back on in the future to talk more. This has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hell yeah, really, man. All right. I'm going to wrap it and end the recording here, but man, incredible. Thanks again.
Thank you.